Well, here we are, folks, in the year of our Lord 2020. And boy, what a year it's been already! See, I'm wearing this because it's the 20s again. It's 2020, so it's basically Newsies. Newsies that make it gay. And in memoriam of the 2010s, may they rest in pieces, and as a very, very serious film critic, I am compelled and obligated to engage in obsessive ranking and list making of any and all media from the previous decade. Apparently. And I know that every reputable critic already made their top X list like weeks, if not months ago. But in my time-honored tradition of striking after the iron has long since cooled, I'm here to talk about the best movies of the 2010s. There are a lot of culture critics, much smarter than I am, who have already written extensively about what the 2010s meant for film and media in general. But I think that the biggest change, indisputably, was the way in which we consume media. That is to say, the rise of streaming. And while I'm not here to necessarily praise nor condemn streaming as a concept, I think it's safe to say that streaming has changed not only the way in which we consume media, but also the kind of media that gets produced and just how much of it gets produced. The 2010s was a decade in which keeping up with pop culture became a nigh impossible task because there was just so much of it. And while yes, a lot of it is garbage, by the end of the decade it seemed that every other week a new must-see series or movie would debut on some platform, be it Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, HBO, or more recently, Disney Plus or Apple TV Plus. So, why all this preamble? Well, the 2010s were the decade in which I became an adult. I was 15 in 2010. I'm 25 now. It was a decade in which I finally began to consume media critically. It was a decade in which I became serious about film and pursuing a career in it. But it was also the decade where I began to feel burnout. After all, not only was there this wealth of past films for me to catch up on from, decades past, the 60s, 70s, 80s, so many classic films that I haven't seen, there was all this new media that I was being bombarded with. Television shows, movies, the stream was endless. And believe it or not, I also have interests outside of film. So finding time to keep up with everything that was being thrown at me was, it was difficult. It's difficult. And I felt like it was a responsibility for me to watch everything that I could, to keep up with everything that I could. Hell, it's still a responsibility that I feel. And I feel pangs of guilt for not being able to watch everything, to not be able to see every film that comes out. What I'm trying to say is, in making a top 10 films of the decade list, there are a lot of movies that could have been on this list that I simply never got around to watching. A lot of them critically acclaimed, a lot of them ubiquitous in pop culture. But I'm only human, and I still managed to watch quite a few movies over the decade. So, while this list is not by any means exhaustive, I think it still captures what movies interested me the most over the decade, which films captivated me the most. And I think they say a lot about the person that I was throughout the years, and the person that I ultimately was by the end of the decade. And to be clear, this list, like any list, is entirely subjective. These aren't like the 10 best films of the 2010s by any means. These are simply my personal favorite films. The films that impacted me the most, the films that I liked the most. So, without further ado, here are my top 10 films of the 2010s. So, let's just get right into it, shall we? Yes, seriously.
Oh, look, an omelet station! Oh, where?
So I've always loved the Muppets, as well as Jim Henson in general. I've always loved the movies. I think The Muppet Christmas Carol is the definitive adaptation of A Christmas Carol. Yes, I will die on this hill. And I've always loved their combination of more sardonic humor mixed with, you know, sincerity and, you know, and heart. And I think Muppets 2011 builds on that legacy remarkably well.
You can't drive to France, Walter.
Yeah, it's way too far.
Then maybe we should travel by map. Good idea, Fozzie.
It's also important to remember the Muppets' place in pop culture in 2011, which is to say that they didn't really have a place.
I'm gonna shoot straight. You guys aren't famous anymore.
Yeesh. I wish she'd shot a little more curvy.
Disney bought them and then proceeded to have no idea what to do with them until genuinely nice guy Jason Segel, still basking in the success of How I Met Your Mother, came to Disney with a treatment and a dream to see the Muppets return to the zeitgeist. Muppets humor has always been fourth wall breaking, but this film is very meta about the relationship between the Muppets and pop culture writ large and is very aware of how precarious that position was at the time of its release. And I think it's great. I think it's fun. I think it's just, you know, sort of like good old let's put on a show pizzazz. I think it's just utterly charming.
You saved it? After all this time? Oh, Karen.
And it also has a lot of interesting things to say about intellectual property, ownership, capitalism. I mean, you know, if you want to go there. I'm just saying it's there. You could do that kind of reading of it. It also managed to piss off Fox News because the villain is like an oil man and he wants to ruin the Muppets. And so like Fox News thought that the Muppets were like anti-oil and just like liberal propaganda, and it's just thank you, Muppets.
Is liberal Hollywood using class warfare to kind of brainwash our kids?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's almost as laughable as accusing Fox News as, being news.
But underneath all that, it's just a very sincere and sweet movie. Like, remember sincerity, guys? Let's have more movies like that. Unfortunately, since this movie's release, Disney has continued to have zero idea what to do with the Muppets, so this has basically been the sole successful endeavor. But at least for one movie, the Muppets were able to put on a good show again. But seriously, Disney, just give the Muppets back to Jim Henson. They want them. They want them.
Are you concerned with the impression you make?
I don't understand.
Yes, you do.
So, this might be my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie.
Do you often think about how inconsequential you are?
Yes.
Do you believe that God will save you?
No.
It's definitely my favorite Joaquin performance, hands down. Yeah, fuck you, Joker. He always brings a lot of physicality to his performances, but here it's especially effective. And Philip Seymour Hoffman is fantastic too. And Amy Adams. Also, just side note, this list has a lot of Amy Adams. There's just such a menace and sense of dread throughout the movie, but it also has some of the most sweeping, beautiful imagery of any PTA film. You know, I really appreciate films that don't, like, totally handhold their audiences throughout. Like, you know, they just sort of leave it up to them to sort of figure out and piece together what the movie is really about. And The Master is probably one of his most elusive films, but it's an elusiveness that I admire, and it rewards repeat viewings. Is The Master about Scientology? Who cares? Frankly, I think the more interesting conversation is about the film's depiction of the country post-World War II, how Freddie Quell's journey is a microcosm of the unrest and directionlessness many felt after the war. But yeah, I'm sure Scientology is part of it too. I mean, what else is there to say, really?
Okay, you are probably going to be a very successful computer person. But you're going to go through life thinking that girls don't like you because you're a nerd. And I want you to know from the bottom of my heart that that won't be true. It'll be because you're an asshole. It's safe to say that The Social Network is probably the most important film of the decade. Is it the best? Maybe. Was it
totally robbed at the 2011 Oscars? Yes it was. I really like David Fincher just in general, and while I'm not sure this is exactly my favorite film of his, it's definitely up there. And it basically sees everyone working at their peak powers. Honestly, there's not much to say that hasn't already been said by everybody else, so just... You did that, David Fincher. Well done.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
I don't understand.
Which part?
So, I love horror movies. I love them, I love them, I love them, I love them, I love them. But more specifically, I like good horror movies. And the 2010s had an embarrassment of riches when it came to smart, interesting, and yes, scary horror movies. But Hereditary is my personal favorite. And I've already gone on record about how much I love this movie, so I won't get too into it here. Toni Collette is astounding in it. It might just be the best performance of her entire career.
And then I realize that I am to blame. Or not that I'm to blame, but I am blamed.
While she definitely goes big with it, it's actually a pretty nuanced and interesting performance. But when she is on...
Don't you swear at me, you little shit! Don't you ever raise your voice at me! I am your mother!
This movie also gave us the emergence of Ari Aster as one of the most promising new talents in Hollywood, even if Midsommar wasn't quite it. Sorry. And while this movie has a reputation for being disturbing and upsetting, it also does work as a straightforward horror film. It also has moments that are actually really funny, and I fully believe that they are entirely intentional.
And all I get back is that fucking face on your face!
You know, it's rare to find a movie that genuinely shocks you, especially in a genre like horror, but Hereditary succeeds at that, and it's the best horror film of the decade. Yes, I said it. "2013 is the year where I really finally started to form my tastes, both as a film goer and also as an aspiring wannabe filmmaker. And Her played a big part in that.
Hello, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Samantha.
It came out at a very formative time of my life, my freshman year of college, and I was going through some stuff. And this movie just really tapped into a lot of the feelings that I had at that time.
And then I realized that I was simply remembering it as something that was wrong with me. That was a story I was telling myself, that I was somehow inferior. Isn't that interesting? The past is just a story we tell ourselves.
And I found myself genuinely moved by it. Her is also my favorite kind of genre mashup, being one part sci-fi, one part rom-com, and one part meditative character drama. And I love its feasible yet also slightly off-kilter view of the near future. People tuck in their shirts but don't wear belts. LA has an operational public transit system. It's wild stuff. And while this movie was a very easy target of lazy mockery because of its premise. You know, guy falls in love with his operating system. I love how it plays it completely straight with absolutely zero cynicism. And it's incredibly romantic and sweet and has a lot to say about relationships and human connections. And it also has Amy Adams. Every movie should have a little Amy Adams as a treat. I thought about not including this because the Toy Story series, I think of them as like a cohesive unit because they all work so well together. So it's difficult for me to separate them and judge them just, you know, individually. Except for. But if I think about the films that affected me most in the 2010s, the ones that had the biggest impact on me, no list would be complete without Toy Story 3.
Losing you.
it's honestly kind of a miracle that this movie is as good as it is, because so much could have gone wrong. Originally, it was going to be produced not by Pixar, but by Disney Animation Studios, because Disney and Pixar were having like a kerfuffle. Michael Eisner was the problem. He's gone now. And so originally, like, it was going to be about the Buzz Lightyear action figures. They get recalled, see, and so the gang has to like go fetch Buzz from like the recall center. It's like the hijinks ensue. It probably would have been bad. But it, along with Toy Story 2, delivers the best a sequel can possibly offer, in that it builds on the foundation of the original while expanding the scope and meaningfully exploring the same themes. It's beautifully animated, it's hilarious, and it has that trademark Pixar soulfulness. Toy Story 3 came out when I was 15 going on 16, so not the exact age of Andy, but close enough. Like, childhood was definitely in the rearview mirror by that point. So I still could completely relate to the emotions and themes in this movie, which is essentially about growing up and letting go of childhood. And I do cry every time I watch it. Like, every single time, without fail. I'm a mess. Also, the final scene, just all of it. Oh god. I consider this movie, as well as the Toy Story series as a whole, one of Pixar's finest achievements. Hell, it's one of cinema's finest achievements. And Toy Story 3 puts into perspective what this series has truly always been about. Impermanence, the passage of time, finding purpose in one's life, and above all, love. And not even the extremely unnecessary Toy Story 4 could dilute the emotional impact that this movie had on me.
What a strange girl you are.
Why?
Flung out of space.
So Carol's probably one of the most romantic movies of any decade, and my appreciation of it is pretty straightforward. Like, it's queer, and it's romantic. Gimme, 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 gimme. Cate Blanchett is always fantastic, but here she is just magnificent. She takes a character that in the source material is very distant and aloof and wrings out so much empathy and woundedness from her. And Rooney Mara is just as great. Their scenes together have such a tenderness and warmth, it really is magical. Also, the Carter Burwell score is fantastic. Perhaps most importantly, it's the rare mainstream queer film that actually feels queer, like it's not subjected to the heteronormative gaze that so many other films like this are. And that's probably in no small part because it was written by Phyllis Nagy, who is a lesbian, and by Todd Haynes, who is gay, and also awesome. Todd Haynes has sort of a reputation for doing these kinds of period melodramas, and his work here is remarkable. And it also gave me one of my favorite memes of the decade.
You should just go to City College. You know, with your work ethic, just go to City College and then to jail and then back to City College, and then maybe you'd learn to pull yourself up and not expect everybody to do everything.
Lady Bird is basically a perfect movie.
Yeah, well, you know your mom's tits, they're fake, totally fake. She made one bad decision at 19. 2 bad decisions.
Like, even though I would rank 2 movies above it, like, I think this one has the least flaws of any movie on this list. Like, there are other movies on this list, probably all of them, that I would, I have nitpicks. There are things that I would change. This movie, nope, it's great. It just, all of it works. Everything works in it. I've also rewatched it more than any movie on this list, and that's partly at least due to the runtime, because it is so economical with its time. I like it when movies respect their audience's time, especially now that we live in the age of the bloated 3-hour blockbuster. Meanwhile, Lady Bird clocks in at about 90 minutes and there is not a single wasted moment. There's an effortlessness to the pacing that's kinda amazing.
It's efficient, it's entertaining, you're in, you're out.
You know, I think an underrated aspect of movies is that they end. Like, that's what makes them different from television, because they end. So stop making them so long. Just, you know, get me in there, get me out, entertain me. And Lady Bird, it does that. It does that so well.
And while it's a fairly simple film on the surface, deceptively simple I would say, there's a lot more going on here as well if you really dig into it.
It's hilarious, it's moving, it's just a joyous experience. Just thank you, Greta Gerwig. Thank you. Okay, you all knew that this was coming.
I like the way you say things. I don't know why you're always putting yourself down, though.
So you won't, I guess?
You really that afraid of what I think?
I don't think I can even overstate the impact that this movie, that this story had on me. And this is probably the biggest example of my bias shining through, but I don't care. It's my list, damn it. And Call Me By Your Name, absurd and unwarranted backlash or no, is a great film. Yes, I do prefer the book, but I think of the two as complementary works. And the movie does make changes to the book that are for the better. And while I do miss the beauty of Andre Assman's prose and the internal monologue that really allows us to plunge into the depths of Elio's desire, I think the movie does a good job of translating that to film.
It's a pretty quiet film, yes, but that's what makes it so intimate. And that sense of intimacy and romantic longing is palpable on screen. Timothée Chalamet, Armie Hammer, Michael Stuhlbarg, they all give incredible performances, but Timmy is the real standout, and a lot of it comes down to the physicality he brings to the role. And that final shot of him is just devastating.
Call Me By Your Name, the film, is pure eroticism and sensuality. It's escapist. And while that might not be for everyone, it is absolutely for me. And to this day, I still find it deeply moving. And for a while, this was my #1 film of the decade because of how deep and personal my connection to it is. But there's just one film that hit all of my pleasure receptors. I am, of course, talking about Because Jellicles are Angelicals do. Jellicles do. Angelicals would.
And a drum roll, please.
I'm just fucking with ya. It's Arrival.
There are days that define your story beyond your life. Like the day they arrived.
Ah, see, I told you there'd be more Amy Adams.
Now that's a proper introduction.
Arrival is the kind of movie that makes me question whether my tastes are my own, because it is so tailor-made for me. Like, it's got everything.
A first contact plot, bizarro science fiction imagery, linguistics, Amy Adams, Denis Villeneuve, cephalopod aliens.
These are all things I am very, very interested in. One of the great things about this movie is just how rewatchable it is, which is a recurring trend on this list in case you haven't noticed. Like, you can go back and watch this movie 2, 3, 4 times and you will pick up something new because of the nature of the story and its structure.
Moreover, I think Arrival does what the best science fiction does, which is tell us something about our humanity. It's science fiction with heart and emotion.
God damn, is Amy Adams fantastic in this, and no, I will never not be upset about her not getting nominated for Best Actress for this. Like what the fuck, Academy?
She conveys emotions that had not existed prior to this film. And the entire thing pretty much rests on her shoulders. It would not work without her.
Denis Villeneuve is also probably my favorite director ever at this point, but this is him at his best. I also love how this movie explores questions that usually just sort of get, like, hand-waved away in a lot of science fiction.
Like, how would we go about communicating with an alien species? It's a very interdisciplinary approach to sci-fi that you don't see too often.
So yeah, Arrival. Best film of the decade. With that being said, Happy New Year. Let's see if humanity can survive this decade. No war with Iran. Till next time.